Welcome to our live leadership coaching masterclass. I am Nancy Gutierrez, President and CEO of the New York City Leadership Academy. Now, today is part two of a conversation about the critical role of principal supervisors. Yesterday, we talked to Dr. Meredith Honig. We talked to her about her new book, Supervising Principals for Instructional Leadership, a Teaching and Learning Approach. Now, just as a brief overview of what we talked about, here are the 7 different key points around the teaching and learning approach: fostering learners' agency, joint work moves, modeling, talk moves, brokering, recognizing all learners as learning resources, and differentiation. Now, the big reveal here was that a principal supervisor is a capacity builder. And I asked Meredith, I said, if we looked at all 7, like, where would you ask us to focus? You know, where do we start? What's our entry as we engage in this approach? And she said, look, I would start with number 1, because fostering learners' agency means that principals are leading their own learning. And there's no better way for us to learn as professionals than when we guide our own learning as part of the process. Now, at the Leadership Academy, we would agree. We call this facilitative competency-based coaching, FCB coaching. And what that basically means is that you are a facilitator of knowledge, not a giver, right? And so our first role first and foremost in any leadership role is that we are building the capacity of those we are leading. And so this is aligned directly to the work that we do. I will add one thing, and that is we are engaged in leadership coaching to what end? We would argue at the Leadership Academy, Meredith would agree that it's in service of creating culturally responsive instructional leaders. And this is where we talk about at the Academy around the intersection of leadership and equity. Now, we're really, really clear that you cannot be an effective leader today or ever if equity is not part of your practice, if you don't have a very sharp lens in the work you do, where you don't know how to, if you don't know how to define it within your own context. And so this is what we mean by by this intersection of leadership and equity. And this is where the coaching practice lives, at that intersection. And today we have a really, really, really special webinar for you, because we're going to get a look into the coaching practice of 2 individuals, 2 people I admire greatly, Dr. Michele Shannon and Principal Christy Connolly, who is Boston-based. Now, just a little bit about these 2 amazing leaders before I have them come on. So Dr. Michele Shannon is currently with the Leadership Academy, and she is our executive vice president. But in her prior life, she was the chief of schools in Boston Public Schools. So Christy and Michele have a real life coaching relationship. I don't know about all of you, but when I remember my first coach, Dr. Kendra Ferguson, who is now in Memphis, Tennessee, and who still coaches me to this day. So as many of you know, you have a coaching relationship that is formal, and these strong coaching relationships continue throughout your life and as you enter into a variety of different spaces. And so we're going to see a real life coaching relationship. Prior to joining the Leadership Academy, Dr. Michele Shannon was also, in addition to being the chief of schools in Boston, a senior director of administrative development for Los Angeles Unified. She's been in every role: teacher, school social worker, assistant principal, school founder. And she is one of my favorite practitioners of all time. So Dr. Michele Shannon, thank you for being here. And we are very pleased to also welcome Principal Christy Connolly. Now, Christy will give us a little bit of context about her school, the Henry Grew Elementary School, but just tell you a little bit about her. Since 2015, she's been the principal of this school, where she works to ensure every person sees themselves as a learner and leader in the school community, exactly aligned to what Meredith talks about with her teaching and learning approach. Throughout her prior professional roles, she, again, every role: teacher, instructional coach, director of network academics for the Boston Public Schools. First and foremost, she's always considered herself a collaborator and a leader of teams, knowing that she cannot do this work of teaching and learning alone. And with that, I would love to invite Dr. Michele Shannon and Principal Christy Connolly to come on to the screen with me. We are so pleased that you are letting us into your practice. Look, I remember the first time someone walked into my classroom as a 3rd grade teacher, and I was like, someone's observing you, and that's part of what we do in education. And imagine your actual coaching relationship being observed and live in real time. So thank you both. For the audience, Consider this a fishbowl, where we're surrounded in a circle around this coaching practice, and we will have time for Q&A after. If you have questions throughout, please use the Q&A box, and we will be sure to respond to that in real time. Without further ado, Dr. Michele Shannon and Principal Christy Connolly.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Christy. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Michele?
I'm great. So will you get us started by just sharing with the audience a little bit of background, because I want them to understand the context that you're working in, and then we'll sort of get started with the coaching.
Great. I believe if we advance to the next slide, we've got a little picture of the GRU School. So the GRU School is a small school in the area of Boston called Hyde Park. We identify our neighborhoods, and we also use the in front of all of our school names, which I am a New York Stater originally. We never said the GRU School. So we have the GRU School here. It is a turnaround school. It was designated turnaround by the state for underperformance over 4 years in 2014, 2015. And at that time, I was the director of network academics, supporting 17 schools in the neighborhood. And I worked with principals and the academic superintendent to develop the academic work in each school. This was one of the schools that year, and I was appointed the principal, which I was very happy to have the opportunity to enter a school and have the opportunity in a turnaround school where you get to hire staff and rethink things and try to leverage some of the autonomies we had. And so with teachers, we determined some community values that really are going to play out in this conversation most likely. Growth mindset, we talk about that almost more so with adults, about ourselves in our schools. So how do we maintain a frame of a growth mindset during difficult conversations, and as we work with students and families and know that we are still going to be learners. And rigorous teaching and learning, we really try to raise the bar each year in the content we put in front of students and the way that we facilitate our learning. Equity and engagement is at the forefront. And we are all leaders. We are a very shared leadership type of school. The model is really distributed. Every staff member is on some type of leadership team and leading the way in a certain niche of the work. So this is my 5th year there and my 18th year in Boston Public. Age myself there. So a little bit more about the demographics of our school, just to kind of give a framework. On the next slide, we see that we have about 240, give or take. We have a very high churn rate. We are one of the last stops out of Boston as families and communities are gentrified and families are misplaced from their homes and forced outside of the city. Hyde Park is right on the edge of the city lines, and then it expands into suburb communities. So on any given year, or within any given year, we have a churn rate of anywhere from 25 to 35% of students coming and leaving our school, which can pose challenges getting to know families and really building supports for our students. However, we've been successful with the work. We also have, I put the school staff information at the bottom for 2020, 2021, and it's sort of important because we have had over this year, we had 4 new staff members due to either retirements or people taking on new positions in the district. And next year we are getting some additional staffing because we are a transformation school, so we're getting some additional positions finally after 5 years. We are getting some important roles. And so this shift in staffing around the new body of staff with the body that's been there since year 1 is really going to cause me to bring this problem practice to the forefront. And the next slide. So my problem with practice is how can I best leverage the culturally responsive instruction observation protocol to create internal coherence? They've reorganized central office, and we have a transformation office now where 33 Boston Public Schools are now under this umbrella of transformation. And it's really 33 schools below the 10th percentile in Massachusetts. We are now at the 12th percentile. However, we did not get the opportunity to take our state testing this year and fly on out. So we are actually fortunate to stay within this umbrella of schools because we are going to benefit from some of the resources, such as a new instructional facilitator. So that person will be new to our school, as well as a part-time social worker and a family liaison. And so with the new staff coming into the building and not having the development that our school has done around culturally responsive instruction, it's going to create an interesting blend of staff with different experiences. And we need to also think about how to use yet a new observation tool from central office, which this is the 5th one we've used in 5 years. However, the last couple years, we've used our own internal tools at the GRU school that were created by our ILT. However, I value the tool itself and thinking about this lens a little more intentionally across our school and with a cohort of other school leaders. I think it will give me a network to kind of work with instead of working in isolation as a school leader. So I will be able to work with other people around this.
Thank you, Christy. All right, so let's just get started with sort of how we want to think through your question, which is how can you actually leverage this moment of change, right? A change in the practices, the change in the expectations, as well as some of the larger changes that are happening just, with this thing we call school in general. So I wanted to start out with thinking a little bit about you first. So when you think about this tool and bringing it to the staff, what's your vision for how this tool can really sort of mobilize your teachers around culturally responsive instruction?
My hope is that the tool will be able to be a grounding point for us to have the conversations that are really tailored to thinking specifically about culturally responsive teaching. I think that we have, in the past, over the past 5 years, we've actually done a lot of different different pieces of work, and based our work on different texts and different tools. And I think the conversations and the learning has been built upon each layer. And I think the one thing that we were sort of missing was a tool that really could ground everyone in the same conversations. And so I think there's a lot of groundwork that we have and a lot of knowledge that has been built, at least with the staff that have been here with us, around becoming an anti-racist institution. Using Boston Public Schools has culturally and linguistically sustaining practices continuum and has been working on that for the past at least 3 years. It might be 4. And so we've really grounded a lot of our work each year in a component of one of those continuums. But the observational tools, I feel, we're missing some things that really kind of force the conversation around, were we really being culturally responsive? Did we really see that in full strength in the classroom? As a state turnaround school, we had to use the class tool. Was the measurement tool that the state uses when they come and do their visits to see how we're doing. And while that tool is okay, I felt like there were components missing. And so I feel excited at this opportunity. However, I think there's a lot of planning that needs to be done. So that's why I'm here.
So yeah, so let's get into some of the planning and your thinking around the planning, because what I heard you say, what I'm hearing is that you're really excited about this tool. You think that it will definitely add value to the practices at your school. And also, it sounds like you are excited about some of the internal coherence and shared language. At the same time, I also heard you sort of talk about the configuration of your staff and having some people who've been with you on this journey for an entire 5 years, who've done a lot of foundational work and, advanced work around culturally and linguistically sustaining practices. And then you also have a body of new people coming in. And in particular, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the instructional facilitator you mentioned. So first, why don't we just sort of talk about, as you start to plan, how are you thinking about integrating using this tool with your instructional facilitator?
So fortunately, I have been able to hire an instructional facilitator who was a principal in Boston Public Schools and also has done similar work and actually used similar texts and similar tools as I did as we were going through the professional learning ourselves around culturally and linguistically sustaining practices. However, that does not mean that we did not have any opportunity to really truly collaborate across schools in a way that I would feel comfortable to say that we have similar feelings about classroom instruction around a tool like this. So I'm hoping that the instructional facilitator and I can work towards, number one, understanding how we facilitate debriefs with our teachers and what's our coaching philosophy and practice, just to see if our practices, how we can align our practices to be coherent in and of themselves. But also we need to really both dig in and probably by doing some more observations and debriefs on videos. I have actual videos. Our school uses video coaching as well. So our teachers video themselves and share it with each other using observational tools and also with us. So maybe taking some videos and going through the tool ourselves and really having conversations over the summer to kind of be better prepared for this, because it's a new tool for everyone, and including me. So I would like to make sure that her and I are at least lined up so that we can do the work, because instructional coaching is my background and that's my passion. So I already am feeling like I still want to be doing that work with her. So 2 is better than 1, but unless we're driving on the same highway, it would be a problem for our school.
So I wondered if you would just talk a little bit about, the work you have to do personally, even before she joins the team. And I'm also just thinking, I'm going to just put race on the table, right? You're a white woman leading this school, trying to really promote culturally and linguistically sustaining practices. What's the personal work you have to do to prepare yourself personally, as well as the learning you need to do with the tool that will set you up for success as you onboard your instructional facilitator? Yeah.
So not just the instructional facilitator, but as I onboard my other staff as well, I am fortunate to have been able to hire candidates of multiple different races. The instructional facilitator is Asian, and I've been able to hire a Latina, and as well as 2 candidates who identify as Black African American. And with that, the diversity of my school staff has been growing, and at the same time, I understand that I have to continue to grow in my understanding of institutionalized and systemic racism, and as well as my own biases, and that work is continuous, and it's something that I've actually put a lot of effort into over the years, and I'm continuing to pursue my knowledge around the systems and structures and trying to break them down, especially in Boston, as people may know that the mayor has declared racism as a public health crisis officially, and that's becoming I think that's important to acknowledge, because it is in our schools as well. The systems are really broken, and how I keep thinking about how my role in my space and my race play into either the perpetuation of all of that, or if I can be a voice and work to be really become an ally and really think about how to work to break the systems, not just in our school, but in our district, because there are plenty that are very identifiable. So I need to continue the journey really about learning more about myself and the way that I see things, as well as building the trust among staff when we're having these conversations, and becoming a better facilitator of the conversations that may, and that hopefully do come up, that will come up, actually. It's not a hope because it will be intentional, but being able to support everyone to feel that there is a safe space, but that the conversations will be tough, and they're expected to be tough. And if they're not, this isn't really the right school for the staff members. And I made that clear this year. I did say those exact words to my staff, my current staff, and the staff who are onboarding are actually getting to work with some of our staff right now. So I'm trying to bring them into the culture pretty quickly. But I do need to think about that. And I think maybe just working on developing my responses to different potential responses from members in the school, whether it's the guilty response or the diversion, or if there's race neutral talk, how to kind of support breaking out of that. And thinking about each community, each staff member, and kind of what kind of responses have I seen in the past, and what kind of responses might I anticipate, and really thoughtfully plan about that. So I have ways to move it forward instead of causing more distress or counterproductivity in the conversations, either in the debriefs one-on-one or when we're doing the work as a whole staff. I just always feel like everyone can grow in that area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really appreciate you implicating yourself, right? And really taking responsibility for the learning and the work that you've already done, but and the acknowledgement that there's still more personal work you have to do around your own blind spots, your own implicit bias, your beliefs and values, and that you're willing to sort of model and share that with your faculty. I also really appreciate and just affirm the way you're starting to anticipate some of the potential responses. And I had been thinking about, I know you and the team have started to have some training on this new protocol, which is really going to open up their practice even more. And so I wondered if we could sort of talk through, if this makes sense to you, some potential places where you might get pushback or resistance. And let's maybe do some thinking, maybe a little role play around like how you will navigate some of the resistance that's coming potentially.
Okay. Well, when I looked at the tool, there's 6 pillars, but 2 that I feel that are going to be really crucial for our, some of them are definitely areas of strength. So I'm kind of interested in seeing how this tool will either reflect that or push that, because we don't ever think we're great at anything at our school. We're actually, I feel like I've hired a lot of people that are really hard on themselves all the time, which is good. We move our way forward. But with the new, we also, as a transformation school, as I have said, we get resources, and well, this year we're getting some resources, and we're going to have a new literacy curriculum, which is going to be a huge lift. And also, we've done a lot of work around building units that are more culturally responsive over the past couple of years. And so with this new curriculum, I think that the pillar around curriculum and planned experiences, and really thinking about students and what is missing in curriculum and diverse perspectives, and building that out is going to be really important for us to be able to return to. And with a whole new staff, I don't know the depth of work that everyone has done around actually trying to do that, like really thoughtfully. The other pillar that I want to, and sorry, go back to the curriculum. That could be a point of contention where someone wants to disagree about like the content of a curriculum, or push back on something that say, well, I think that it's fine, and there's no narrative missing. Like that is what happened. People who may not know historical that there's multiple sides that have been whitewashed out of curriculum, and even new curriculum is not there yet. And then also this other, the other pillar around critical consciousness. And so thinking about actively deconstructing negative stereotypes and really thinking about real world problems and how do we see that in our classrooms and within a curriculum as well. So I think that those are not, I don't know necessarily exactly where the pushback will be, but I know that this work will be hard, and whenever work is hard, some people's true perhaps views on things can arise, and that's where I think that might happen in those two areas. Those are the areas though that I would like to focus on as a school, just due to the fact that 2/3 of the kids are going to be exposed to a new curriculum, and we haven't seen it yet. Well, we've seen like a little part of it, but the orders, it hasn't come through. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's take up the curriculum, if that's okay.
Sure.
For a moment. And so let's just, for a few minutes, I want to sort of get you in the headset of one of your teachers or a few of your teachers, a grade level team that you think it might have some pushback or resistance or blind spots, right? In terms of, I like your focus on narratives and voices and stories that are missing from the curriculum. So let's just sort of play around with how you might approach one of your teams that you think will need a little bit more support in helping to make sure that the curriculum is as culturally diverse and responsive as it can be.
Yeah. So do you want me to, what's your question again? Sorry.
If you're into, and maybe actually I'm thinking about this, maybe you don't want to name a specific team, but if you're anticipating that there might be some places where in this new curriculum that you guys haven't even had a chance to explore, how you want to go about framing this curriculum for the staff so that they feel validated around the work that they've done previously and opens up their mind to the possibility of expanding to a new set of content and curriculum that hopefully is more culturally responsive or as culturally responsive.
So I think that validation point that you just brought up is really important. And I think sometimes I give the validation or the positive accolades quickly, and I'm always moving on to what's next. But I think that when I heard you say that, it's just made me think about really pointing out explicitly where they made those moves in previous units. So pulling a unit that they did make and perhaps talking through the decisions that they made at the time to include narratives. We use the 7 forms of bias to look at curriculum. So we're going to have to do that again, obviously, and we should be doing it all the time. But at the GRU school, we talk about being the 3 C's, and the 3 C's at the GRU are critical consumers of curriculum. And so that's been since year 1. And we always say that for every single lesson, everything's, did you critically consume this before sharing it? And, as you can get in your way, you can get in your own way as you think you're done with the work, with a unit. So I think by pulling a unit that I think was done well and that has evidence of building those narratives in. I mean, I had a teacher text me one night up in arms that this is one side of the narrative and I can't believe this is all that's in here. It was 9 p.m. So we were going through kind of what was missing. And so I have some teams that are really strong at that. And I think they do their due diligence on really learning about history and learning about missing narratives or rose-colored glasses type of curriculum. And so kind of pulling with them and starting with them and talking about the strengths within a unit that they've created, and then remind them of the process that we took and ask them, what was hard about this? What did you need to learn? And what can we do as we move forward to move into a new unit and do something similar with the work that's coming up? I think the hardest thing, even with those teachers who are really strong at this work and really think critically and do their research and try to learn, is that you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wonder, on top of all of this, I'm expecting, right, that people are going to be able to look through curriculum and know that this wasn't the truth, or there's a whole nother side of the story, or this is only half told and the whole truth isn't there. And so, and I'm not going to know it all, that's for sure. So how can we, having teachers support me in thinking about how can we develop a process to find out who does know, and build on the assets within the community of who knows what about what, and kind of using our peers and research and the district perhaps to help us fine tune these units, because it's rolling out across 33 new schools, and the time is now. The time wasn't now, it was hundreds of years ago, but the time is now, and it's always now, to make sure that we are working towards building students who feel valued and feel stretched and make the progress that they can make based on what we put in front of children, and stop telling lies, making sure that we're not participating in perpetualizing the systemic historical racism. So that's an idea of a process, but I do know that some staff, again, have more knowledge and know how to do the work a little bit stronger than others.
So, and I know you have a sense of that from your current staff. I'm wondering what you're thinking about in terms of how you will be able to assess the capacity and depth of knowledge of your incoming new folks, and how you might be thinking about going about leveraging this tool as an opportunity to accelerate their learning.
Yeah. I'm glad we're doing this coaching conversation, so I can be better prepared. So I tend to try to do job embedded professional development and really think about ways in which people can work together. And I think if I strategically group staff members, perhaps not by grade level common planning time teams, but more based on teachers who I know who have the strengths and practice in this, because it's not that people don't have strengths or have something that could be greatly added. I don't know yet everyone's strengths, but how can I create a space where people are working in groups together on something that's a little blatantly obvious, perhaps looking through the curriculum and finding something where people could chew on it at some sort of level that isn't, you don't have to have the whole history and development of racism known on the back of your hands, but where you have people who will be able to start the conversation and work towards kind of looking at something, researching, revising, and talking about how would you present this to children. Because the other thing I want to happen is I want teachers to teach that says it like this, but this isn't what it is, and have the lesson plan to build it in. It's not just to replace things, because we want our students to develop the critical consciousness of what they're reading and what they're accessing, not just like, you know what, that lesson's horrible, replace it with this. No, let's like talk about why that's horrible, and then build in the power piece of the lesson. So I think by leveraging some of the strengths we have in the building and making sure that we're doing this practice together a lot, it will allow me to observe and see what the new staff bring to the table, and also leverage the strength of the people who I know can do it pretty well, actually.
So I really like the asset and strengths-based approach that you're starting to form around how to get everyone together on the same page. I really wanted to, before we start to close, I wanted to just check in. So, what are some of the things now that we've brainstormed a couple different areas? We didn't really talk a little bit about parents, and I know you were thinking about your families too. So, you might want to. I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit for a second around how you will message and really bring your family and communities into the understanding of this protocol, as well as the new literacy curriculum. So I just wanted to give you a moment to sort of reflect on your families, because I know that's important.
Yes. I love my families, and they are definitely assets, and they will check me when I'm wrong and share their thoughts. We have worked a lot around engagement over family engagement, not in the sense, not what people traditionally think engagement is. We build authentic relationships with our families, and I have town halls with them virtually. That's been something that's been great, that I'm definitely continuing next year. But I did share with them that we will be working around on this, and that I want to have them involved in the conversation. So I would love to let parents participate in looking at some of the curriculum and going through some of the processes and offering their knowledge around what's missing, what could be better, or what from their community epistemology or their cultures or backgrounds could we add in that would really create a space where it's really group specific and really about leveraging our community voices. So it feels like it's our school, it's curriculum that's tied to our families and our community. So I am actually pretty excited about thinking about, on our next coaching conversation, how to bring families in to this conversation in an accessible way for everyone, and to really make a difference in the curriculum that their children are consuming all day. I think it's a key piece to changing society for a better way, and definitely an institutionalized systemic failures curriculum.
So Christy, I want to make sure we have time for a few questions from the audience, but I want to make sure we also wrap up our coaching for the moment. So just reflecting back, what are some of your next steps that you are planning to do as a result of this conversation?
Yeah, I think some of my next steps include really thinking through different responses that I may get from staff, both new and returning, and having a better way to respond, make sure I'm strong with my words in the way I handle different situations or different kinds of pushback. I don't think I'll have like intentional pushback, but when people have gut reactions, thinking about how to take that and get it back to a forward moving thought. And then also just thinking about structuring the professional learning that either we do within our ILT first, or whether it's whole school, really thinking about the way I structure and pair people and what task I put in front of them, making sure it's not too grand, like, hey, take this whole unit and do this. Maybe taking one lesson or one piece that I know has something missing. And I can do that by prepping with the Office of Transformation or our Office of Equity, or any of our offices really over the summer, really planning for that, and make sure that it's systematic with the teachers who are very strong at this, with perhaps our newer teachers, our teachers who didn't go through the process of learning. Because there are people, we did a lot of learning that's, I realized today when I was talking about it, that a lot of people didn't have, they just didn't have at our school. And so really continuing to build the trust, and by planning purposeful groupings and leveraging the assets of people to actually do this in practice together over and over again before, even if we don't have our units yet, but really just taking a piece of a lesson and going through the process. So I think I have to plan that out really thoughtfully and make sure I know what I'm talking about in regards to that lesson.
Yeah, I also just want to remind you of the other piece you mentioned, which is the affirmation of the prior work, right? And really just remembering how, and being really purposeful about how you linger there, right? Not just affirm and move. Okay, now we have to move on, but how are we leveraging all the good work that was happened in the past,
Yeah.
and bringing all that experience and learning into this new work.
I think I need to,
Continue
yeah, you make me think I need to build like a storyline. I need to like go back and build a storyline and all of the things we did around this piece to kind of, yeah, I do.
I like that. I like that. Just lastly, real quick, any feedback for me? What would have made this coaching conversation more productive for you?
Well, I do appreciate the space to think and talk. I feel like you were really listening and then giving me a question that would facilitate my thoughts to move forward and narrow. I'm a big, I don't know, a big thinker. I see a bigger vision. So I think you helped me break it down even more. I think potentially asking me, continuing to narrow the questions for me. My style is I think probably I probably try to do a 5-year plan in 1 year is the way I think, and to kind of continuing to push me to narrow so I can visualize like something concrete, which I think we got to at the end. So in essence, you kind of did it, but continuing to push me to a funnel, like, and I think you were getting there when you were about to ask, like, let's role play, or for example, what would an example of that be? That would help me really visualize it a bit more.
Okay. All right. I'll take that in for future conversations. So Nancy, I think you're coming back to just give us a few minutes to answer some questions from the audience.
I am. Well, first of all, thank you both, Christy and Michele. You know, as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, you know, Meredith calls it a teaching and learning approach. And when we think about classrooms where really effective teaching is happening, who's doing the heavier lift, right? Our students are doing the heavier lift and thinking in the same way in an effective coaching situation, the coachee is doing the heavier lift. The coach is taking an inquiry stance, asking the right questions, guiding, supporting the guidance and being a facilitator of that learning. And so I want to thank you both for that experience. We have great questions. We just, to the audience, we don't have a chat box. We do have a Q&A box. But I would like to ask you, as I go through a lot of the questions that were already asked, where did equity show up in the conversation for you? And I just want to know, was it a moment? Was it a certain phrase that was used either from the coach or the coachee? Where did it show up? And as you're adding those to the Q&A box, you can just use it as a chat box. I will ask some of the questions. One place it came up for me, Michele, was when you said, hey, let's just name race. Let's put it on the table right now. You are a white woman leading a school with predominantly students of color, and started to go there. And so we have some questions from the audience about that moment in particular. And so let me just start with the one here. And it says, you know, introspection around race is important and necessary, but it's hard for white people, and this person saying I'm white. So it helps to have quality support, mentor, training around race. Is there a resource that either of you would recommend to support administrators? School leaders do this really effectively and really well. And we got that a couple of times from different people. Any resources? Either from either perspective, sure, coachee. Yeah.
There's a lot of text to read. One thing I did do, and perhaps I would suggest to white school leaders or any school leaders really, is if you don't have a professional learning community that's focused on this work, to find a professional learning community to join or create one with some people who are interested in exploring the work together. This year I was part of a professional learning community, and we were focused on this text, Culturally Responsive School Leadership by Khalifa. So this text, it's pretty concrete. It gives some really good examples on shifts that schools can make and leaders can make. So this has been my grounding text this year. But I think showing yourself as a learner with your staff and reading some of the same texts alongside and having those conversations, as well as I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I participate in a white affinity group. And so affinity groups by race really can help you hear and learn from your peers about ways to become a stronger ally, a stronger white ally, and also a space to kind of have the conversations. I lead a school, as you said, a large population of student of color, and I have one of the most diverse staffs in Boston Public School, which was intentional, but it also brings a new layer as a leader of a faculty that isn't white, and I am white, and I'm in this leadership role. So how do I work on that? So finding those support groups, not necessarily so text-based work, but also finding an affinity group, and also your amazing colleagues of color who can that will tell you the truth to your face. It's always good to run by your ideas, to hear different perspectives, because what you may presume is always the place you don't want to go, is presuming you know.
Mm-hmm. You know, Christy, I'm glad you brought that up. While you were talking about the white affinity group, it made me think about is it Me and White Supremacy, or White Supremacy and Me, which is a really interesting sort of self-guided introspection around the ways in which white supremacy culture lives in all of us. And so that's another really strong resource that I encourage people to consider in their work.
Thank you both. We have an amazing leader practitioner, Verta Maloney, on our staff, and she talks about this work being around race and about equity being unpracticed. And so, you know, and this is way you talk, Christy, about creating spaces for staff. So we're practicing, right? Like we have to get better at doing something that has been taboo in many ways to discuss, right? And so creating spaces to continue the conversation and to practice is important. And I think the other piece is to name it. I mean, just for the person to answer the question, I think, Christy, you as the principal, I assume and confirm this, that you have been very clear that this is a value across the school, you know, that we are going to have discussions around race, around belief systems, around bias, you know, that I find it, you know, and I find it really important for the leader to create that space and those conditions so that others can feel free within that space to actually have real conversations. Is that accurate? You've done that.
Yes, we have. And I think this school year in particular it's been an up and down school year, as you know. And so this year, actually, we were thinking, and some of our staff members who have been with me were like, we're not creating the space. We feel it less this year. And we were talking about why that is. And we're actually really excited to kind of re-engage ourselves. I mean, we had reflected on the anti-racist multicultural continuum each year, which is a continuum to think about your institution and where you're at. And I had the whole teachers do it in groups and think about it. And we didn't do that this year. And we usually do it towards the end because it kind of helps us launch into next year, but we didn't get to it. And that's on me. That's on me for, you know, not ensuring that even through all of this, even through the work that we're doing virtually and everywhere, that I didn't get to that space. And what I do love about my staff is that they'll call me out on it, and I'm okay with that. So it's a mutual accountability that this is the work. This is the work. This is what we do. And especially at our school, if that's not what if you're not there and you're not willing to move, like you're not willing to do the work, you know, I wouldn't say go teach somewhere else, because no, just choose something else until you're ready, till you're really ready. So I do agree. And we've held the space more sacred, and this year has been a little bit different, and I've heard it, and we're going to snap back in to that intentionality a little bit more.
But I want to take a moment to affirm, though, I know you didn't get a chance to do the continuum work, but you have made space, because we've had coaching conversations about this, right? And you have tried to really hard in a virtual environment to create space for conversations and reflection, which I think you should really feel good about.
There are so many good questions, and I know we're getting to time here, but you know, there's one question around, you know, in the virtual space, does this work change? Do you still continue to observe practice? I'll say a few things on that. One is that one thing we talked about yesterday with Meredith was, does the work change virtually? The answer is absolutely not. If anything, you know, it helps us It gives us more access to multiple classrooms via Google Classroom. There's a lot of, all the work remains the same. Maybe the methodology about how we go about it changes, but it remains the same. The other piece too is that I want to commend you both for modeling what it means to intersect equity with instruction, right? And again, you're coaching to what end? We're coaching to create culturally responsive instructional leaders, right? I think there's too much around like, oh, let's go do the equity thing, right? As if it's separate from our business around schooling, around what we do, what we're charged to do. And I want to read to everyone the Leadership Academy's definition of a culturally responsive instructional leader, just as we close and as food for thought to think about. And the way we describe it and define it at the Leadership Academy is that a culturally responsive instructional leader is a leader who recognizes the impact of institutionalized racism on their own lives and the lives of the students and families they work with, and embraces their role in mitigating, disrupting, and dismantling systemic oppression. Now that takes place throughout the school, throughout the system, throughout the classrooms. And so thank you for marrying that for us today, I think, in your coaching conversation. And with that, I want to just say thank you. There are so many questions here. For those of you in the audience, we will do a follow-up email that you will get from Digital Promise that will show you, that will give you access to resources. I know that Dr. Shannon and Principal Connolly have some resources they want to share, and so we'll be sure to do that within our follow-up email to all of you as well. And with that, let's talk about the next webinar that we have coming up. So I hope you will join us on June 23rd, and DC Public Schools will be here to talk about, sustainable strategies for virtual recruitment, selection, hiring of teachers and school leaders. And, Christy did hit on that today quite a bit, around creating the team and around the team being really significant in this work and as we advance. Before we close, I want to turn it back and to say final words, Michele or Christy. We've learned so much from both of you, and there's so many takeaways. Is there one thing you would want us to take away from today that you would name as we close?
Christy, I'll let you start.
Of course. I hope that people are leaving with hope and inspiration that the work is hard, but if we do the self-reflection and we do the coaching work and you find someone who can push you, and that you can have the kind of conversations where you're not afraid to say something wrong or fail, that's the key here, because we as school leaders need that kind of support and that kind of person in our lives, especially as we're trying to create as much change as we can in a short amount of time to really give the next generation what they need to be successful in this society. So
thanks, Christy. And I guess my final word is really to the principal supervisors in the office, in the audience. This is your work, right? It's really like, I wish we could get rid of the word supervisor, but that's okay. We don't have to. It's around principal support. Mm-hmm. And so just going back to this one-on-one teaching and learning, and the work that you do with your principals in your meetings, that's your platform, and that's your opportunity to really push your vision for equity across your schools, and to then, bring your principals along. I'm blessed because Christy's already on her journey, but we know that people are in different places. And so now it's not the time to, I know we're distracted with how are we going to do school? How are we going to come back? What is it going to look like? But now it's not the time to take your eye off of equity and instruction and what happens inside the classroom. And we just thank you.
Well, thank you both. Audience, as you log off, you will be prompted to take a survey. We do ask that you take it and give us feedback. As you saw Michele Shannon ask for feedback at the end, we always want to make sure our practice gets better and better. Christy, Michele, we can't thank you enough. On behalf of everyone here, thank you so much for sharing your practice with us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.